Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Canary Room, episode 19 of season 3 of the show. Before we start, I must say a massive thank you to everybody who's donated to the show. So David Huntington, Martin Gentles, and to, of course, Michael Burling. Gents, thanks very much for your donations. If you're able to donate to the channel, hit the donate button in the top right-hand corner of our YouTube page. Today, although I say this every time, you are in for a real treat. We visit a master, not a word I use loosely, a master of the Norwich Canary. That person is, of course, Mr. Keith Ferry, an absolutely thoroughly enjoyable trip, as all of the trips have been. Received some really good feedback on our visit to Kenny Masterman and our visit to Gerald Spencer. And I really appreciate everybody taking time to get in touch with the channel and in touch with the show. But today we are in a master's hands. We see half an hour with Keith, and you know, I would urge you all to watch the entire show and then watch it again. As I've put the edit together today, it's been a real pleasure to edit, and as I've listened back to conversations that Keith and I had, I'm just sponging so much knowledge in. So without further ado, grab yourself a cuppa, sit back and enjoy the show. So everybody, we have an incredible, I think, rare opportunity. It's a first for me. Those of you who are familiar with the Norwich breed of canary will recognise this man at a safe distance from me, and that is, of course, Mr. Keith Ferry. Keith, welcome to the Canary Room.
Thank you, and welcome to my bird room.
What a stunning, well, a stunning location, a stunning setup. I've got bird room envy. I said to Keith, I've only just met him for the first time today, but I've told him I can cook. And, you know, if the opportunity was there, I wouldn't mind moving in. And I think when you see the quality of some of the birds that we're going to see today, then you'd be clamouring as well to make that move in. So, Keith, the Norwich, it's a stunning bird. And you are, you know, renowned for having some world-class Norwich. So where did the attraction start? Where did it all begin for you?
Well, I think it all started not long after I got married, when we settled down and I needed a hobby. And I started off with a few foreign finches in a flight outside. Then from there it stemmed on to a few British in the flights. So I did go and see a guy who lived fairly local, who kept British, but he also was a big mulling man, and I quite liked the looks of these mules. And he said the best canary to have for mulling is obviously the Norwich. So I had to go and find whoever got some Norwich. And I purchased some Norwich in the early 70s, about 73, something like that. I got married 71. 1973 I started and got my first Norwich. And I finished up having a bit of this, a bit of that, and not breeding much birds at all, especially any mules. But the guy who I got who gave me this advice, he also gave me some very sound advice. He said, sort out what you think you like the most out of your birds and specialise for the start. Get used to them. And he said, you can always come back to your other lines, your other birds. So I thought the Norwich are going to be the bird I'm going to keep. So that would have been 1973. I got rid of everything else and kept the Norwich. And it all stemmed from that.
sage advice, and I think advice we should probably follow in the Canary Room with the menagerie that we have there. And Keith, we talked off camera about your sort of I use the word hero loosely, but the man that you really admire with the Norwich.
Well, the guy who I went and got my Norwich from was a guy called Frank Bruno, which was about 10 miles away from where I lived. And a very good friend of mine invited me over there, introduced me to him, was Frank Bruno. And so I used to go over there. I used to drop the wife and the children at parents on a Sunday, and then I'd go floating over there and sit in his bird room most of that afternoon and talk about these Norwich Canaries. And he told me his birds stem from a guy called Fred Storer, who in them days and previous to those days was the master of the Norwich in the country, from Burbage, Inkling Burbage. Everybody went to Fred Storer for his birds. So I looked into him. I never met the guy, but I got me birds like second-hand bloodline from the Fred Storer. So he's been my idol, and what he's done in his time of breeding, producing this quality bird and winning the major shows all over the country was this Fred Storer. And I thought that's who I want to follow in his footsteps.
And I think it's fair to say, Keith, that, I mean, you might be far too modest to say this, but you have done just that.
Well, I've been very lucky. I mean, I've persevered and I've bred a good bloodline, and I've showed me birds. I mean, I've done well as a novice, and when we used to show birds at Alexandra Palace, built me birds up from there. And then after, obviously, the 5-year period of being a novice, you have to go champion. And I know one or two friends around here said that once they go champion, I don't think they'll be showing for a few years, but not me. I went straight out to the big shows where the champions were showing. Obviously got thrashed the first year, but I worked on it, and within 2 or 3 years' time, after I become champion, I started beating them. So it all paid dividends, persevered, breeding a good quality bird.
And I think, you know, for all of us, there lies the lesson, doesn't it, really? You know, don't be afraid to put yourself out to be beaten, because actually through that process you learn. And you learn maybe what birds the judges are looking at, what birds the judges like, and how the model, you know, looks and evolves over a period of time.
Well, I think you've got to take your birds out to show against the guys who have been winning, to see what your birds are like against them, how far behind you are, and then where you can improve on your bird. And if you have to buy a bird in to improve that line, and that's, you know, it's all the knowledge you're going to get from the experienced breeders. So that's what I took on, and that's I think I bought a bird in which was a Jack Dixon's, and that has started my line, and it helped to develop the bird I've got today.
And it can often be that one, you know, you can immediately pinpoint that one bird, and it can often be that one bird, can't it, that just takes you to that sort of next level. It sprinkles the dust that perhaps you were that touch short of.
Well, that's right. And once you get your start on the pinnacle of my line was in 1986, when I actually showed a lovely buffet at the NEC, which went on and took Best Norwich, Best Canary, and took Supreme. So that's what really gave my name, and I've never looked back since. So
that's not a bad pinnacle. That's kind of the modern day equivalent of climbing Everest, I think, in the Canary world.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And in them days, I think it was nearly 10,000 birds at the NEC. So it was a great achievement, and it really made mine.
And I believe there is a picture that we'll do a cutaway to now that we can see of that bird in the shed still.
Certainly, I've got one. This was a picture of the bird what won the Supreme, and that's a picture of taken by Dennis Avon at the time. And it was on the following week from winning it. It was on the front page of the Cage and Avery, and it's difficult to get a good picture of a Norwich, but that turned out excellent.
Yeah, no, it looks, even now, sort of 34 years on, it looks still a stunning bird.
Yes. And the other thing was that the Norwich, in 1986, the Norwich had never took Supreme at the National, the English National. The only one who had done it previous to that was Fred Storer, and he'd done it in 1949, which was the year I was born. So that was some achievement.
Yeah, that is a real feat. So Keith, we've got 3 stunning examples of Norwich here. With a buff hen in the middle.
That's right.
It's
a variegated yellow cock.
Variegated yellow cock and a
variegated buff cock.
And I think the viewers will be, A, able to see the quality of them. B, they will, when they find out that they're nest mates, and that quality is in all 3 of them, I think that really shows the quality of the birds that are in this room.
Well, it's knowing your birds, knowing how to breed them, and knowing how to pair them to get show birds like this.
Yeah.
Well, these were first round from one nest. In fact, I had 4 in the nest, but I unfortunately lost one in the nest. But when they all finish up like this, then it's well worth the job. These all, like I say, all unflighted, all young ones. Just a shame there ain't no shows this year.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure these would have done well.
Yeah.
But for me, they're going to be my stock for next year. So that's how I look at it. I can see them every day, so they're giving me pleasure each day.
And I think they'll give everybody who watches the show pleasure. I've got some close-up footage, and you might see my hand shaking a little bit. It's almost a nervousness of, and I don't know whether the camera will do the feather quality of them justice, but the quality of the feather on all of them is outstanding, Keith. And of course, birds are 90% feather, really, aren't they? And
well, they are. I mean, with an Norwich, for the model and the type, they've got to be short and collared with quite a good width on them, with a nice head, nice rise in the head. So they're all a compact bird, and they're called the John Bull of the fancy, short and collared. But to get them like that, you've got to know your feather, because it's only feather. So you get soft feather, hard feather. You get fine feather, coarse feather. But the 2 feathers you really want to think about is hard and soft. The soft is a long feather, long wide feather. Hard feather is a short feather. And that's how to pair your birds up. And this is, you've got to have in your head how the feather is going to come and how those chicks are going to be.
Yeah.
It's no good breeding. This is a nice hen, nice feathered hen, soft feathered hen. So it's no good putting it to a soft feather cock. You couldn't pair them with, like, if that was being a yellow, because these are soft, you can't pair them together.
Yeah.
Because all you're creating extra length of feather and width. And that's where you have the trouble in the Norwich. And this is where a lot of people don't understand the feather. And that's my biggest concentration on breeding the Norwich, for feather quality, but still trying to keep the size to the standard as well. Because at the end of the day, the standard is 6 to 6 1/4 inches. Now, you don't want to be no bigger than that.
Yeah. And that's they are stunning examples, and in the room we talked about as Fife breeders as I am, and now you are as well. We talked about the practice in a Fife breeding is running one cock over multiple hens, but in your room you might run one cock over a couple of hens, but it's largely a pair breeding.
Well, I find, obviously with a Norwich compared to a Fife are more active. So cock Fife is very active, can oversee more hens. Whereas the Norwich, they're a bit more sluggish. And personally, I like to keep true pairs.
Yeah.
And then if also with Norwich, I know Norwich are difficult to breed and they can be difficult to rear. Hence you do go and have feeders, but I also like to hopefully that these Norwich will rear their own youngsters.
Yeah.
I probably don't. What you need is to guarantee the first round. Hence the first round definitely go under feeders.
Yeah.
And then if I think the pair would feed, then I'll try them on the second round or the third round. If you're not breeding many and keep them under feeders, then try your Norwich with some feeder youngsters.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, you're breeding that instinct out. But they are more sluggish, more lethargic than the Fife. So you have to persevere with it. But I do like when you've got a true pair and see them feeding, you can't beat a pair of Norwich feeding than any other canary.
No, stunning. And I've noticed, Keith, and as we look around your setup in a moment, that in the dividers you have a small hole at the bottom of the dividers, and is that so that I assume you put the cock on one side, the hen on the other, and so that the cock can see the hen and feed?
Yeah, well, there's two reasons for that. There's one for the cock and hen to get used to one another. And when you're watching the cock feed the hen, or she's calling tread, they can see one another. You can pull the slide out a little bit, do the same thing. But the other thing is if they are rearing chicks, when you try to wean the chicks off, you can have the chicks one side and they'll feed the chicks through that hole.
So it forms two purposes.
Exactly.
And I think one of the things that I'm like a sponge when I come into anybody's room, and Keith's room is exceptional. You can see behind us here we've got the staging for the birds at eye level, which is allows you to really view the birds and pass that sort of that critical eye on them. And then behind Keith you've got an incredibly impressive set of custom built flight cages.
Yes. Well, I find the flight cages, especially for the winter months, I don't like to see my birds in single cages or double breeders. They'll go in the flights, so they've got plenty of room to get exercise. And then that gives me chance to clean and paint my cages if they need to be. Keep them through the winter months empty, so they get all their exercise and feeding, and it saves me time. So going around all these cages, water is here, it doesn't take me long to do them in the winter months.
Yeah.
The second thing is that when I am paired and they are breeding, these flights are empty. So when I do get the youngsters, when I'm lucky enough to breed youngsters, they go straight into flights after they're weaned, and they get the exercises. In fact, these do open up to much bigger flights, and that's what I use for the winter. At the moment where they're molting, and when I wean the youngsters, they're in the smaller flight, is that they don't fly too far and get what I call stiff claw. And we'll see later when we go around there that a lot of my perches are natural perches.
Yeah, I know.
They're smaller, and then because with Norwich they're prone to, if they're flying any distance onto a big perch, they'll knock that back claw back. But I don't, touch wood, have any problem with stiff claw.
I noticed that, and I'm really glad you explained it, because as I was walking around, I was thinking, these are natural perches in here, and I wonder, it's unusual, certainly for me. I see them in British sheds all the time, but in a canary shed, I thought that's I was intrigued as to why. So I'm really glad that you've covered that for us, Keith.
Yeah, they're various sizes as well. I mean, like here you get what I've made them myself, the dowel type, but further up they get the smaller natural perches, so they get used to it.
Fantastic. And then in terms then of your breeding and selection each year, sort of roughly do you have do the cages dictate the number of birds that you keep? Do the quality of the birds dictate the number of birds that you keep? Is it a combination of both of those things?
Well, I think it's a combination. I mean, it's with the Norwich, I think 16 pair with probably a couple of spare ends is plenty to keep a good stud going.
Yeah.
If you have more than that, you're only breeding for quantity.
Yeah.
And I like to breed for quality as well as quantity.
And in terms then of the sort of the breeding lifespan of a Norwich, and you know the flighted birds that you've used this year, do you have? I know some breeders will have a sort of a percentage in their mind that they use as a guide, so they'll keep a number of their flighted birds back, and then a number of their a number of unflighted. Do you work to that kind of regime?
Well, generally, my theory is that I always pair flighted to unflighted.
Right.
So I mean, if I've got good birds, then especially cock birds, I'll definitely keep them for a second year. Unless it's an exceptional bird, I'll keep them even longer. But I'd like to pass on good quality birds to other fanciers, and also it's good to keep young stock. So generally, especially hens, I like to breed for 2 years if they're good, and cocks 2 to 3 years, but pass them on to people who can help them out.
Yeah.
And then it keeps me with a young stock in the bird room.
Fantastic, thank you. So Keith's room is a room of two halves. Behind me here, with the flight cages, on the other side of the room are all of Keith's Norwich, and on this side is I was going to say small, but it's not that small. A developing stud of Fife Canaries, Keith. So you've started using Fifes to help with the Norwich feeding. Is that right? But they've ignited something inside you.
Well, they have done. In actual fact, I think this season, they've took over from top spot of my Norwich. Yes, I originally had them for feeding my Norwich. I had some not so good type as these, which were excellent feeders. But it got to the point I thought I want to see a bird which I'd like to see, a nice show bird, and so I finished up purchasing some good quality Fife. They really took me on. They're a bouncy bird, and they're certainly a challenge. They are good feeders, but they have, like I've just said, took over, and they're excellent breeding birds. And this season, I've actually got my bird room full of them.
And there are a number of, I can vouch for that, there are a number of very high quality Fife Canaries in here. So, not content with winning everything in the Norwich world, it seems that Mr. Ferry is moving his ambition into the Fife world. But they are lovely birds, and like you say, they're a really nice addition, aren't they, to the bird room?
They are. I mean, I find them a challenge, and but that's what bird breeding, the hobby is all about. 46 years of breeding Norwich has been a challenge, and still is a challenge. But these Fife are a bigger challenge for me. But I'm very happy how they're developing. So there's a reward at the end of the day when your birds are getting better each season.
Absolutely. I think I don't know if your wife is the same. My wife talks. I tell her that my hobby is relaxing and enjoyable, and she reminds me of all of the moments where I come out of the room with my head in my hands and a pair hasn't worked or something stopped feeding and all of those things, and she reminds me that it's not that relaxing, but the challenge is what really drives us, isn't it?
Oh, exactly. I mean, we talk about being relaxing. I don't think you've got time to sit down and relax when you're in the bird room. There's always something to do, and they are a challenge. And unfortunately, you have more headaches with the Norwich and disappointments. But with the Fife, it's been a big challenge, and once you got the youngsters, it doesn't finish there. I'm learning all the while with them, and it seems a lot of the time is the show training and how they're showing in the show cage, and hence these hanging the cages on the front of the cage, the breeding cages, to train them. And I found that this year I always gone off the ball with the Norwich, because these are taking more time than the Norwich. So things have got to change a little bit next year.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll rectify that, Keith. But again, you know, for anybody, and I think most of us as bird fanciers are sort of, we have this inquisitive nature. We're almost sponge-like in what we see and what we do in rooms, and these things, as you've talked about, Keith, on the front of the cages. I mean, they hold the show, or the training cage, the show cage in fixed position. I know many Fife breeders will have a sort of hook on the show cage, and then it can wobble and you're knocking it over and all kinds of things, but these are a fantastic addition to your room.
Yes, well, I started off by putting a hook on the cage, and you're quite right, Matt, that each time I walk by and knock one, it'd swing round, etc. Well, not with these, they're not. They go on there, you pick the door up, they're in and out, and they can place themselves there as sturdy as can be. And what I do, there's 8 along here, 8 cages. Each day they drop down the line, and then go back up when the full are done. And they're getting used to the cage.
Yeah.
So I'm getting there.
You're getting there. You most certainly are, Keith. So, Keith, before we leave you today, and it's been a real enjoyable day. So, thank you very much indeed for accommodating myself and those of you who can't see. Adam Kendall is ferreting round the back somewhere, looking at Norwich, and
I'm going to be checking his pockets.
Yeah, you and me both. we'll be patting him down, but. For the newcomer looking at Norwich as a breed and looking to come into Norwich, because they are, an incredibly attractive bird. What would be your advice for the newcomer coming into Norwich?
Well, any newcomer that's coming into the hobby, for the start, if they've never bred canaries but want to come into the canary world, is not to go straight into Norwich. They need to get a bit of experience with a more simpler canary. For instance, the Fife, which are easier to breed.
Yeah.
Once they got that experience behind them, and they really love the Norwich, then go for it. But also go to a breeder who's going to help you. And a breeder that's got a good quality bird, look at his stock, get invited over there, look at his stock. Also a breeder that does well on the show bench. You don't have to be winning every time, but look at what he's done with his birds overall. It's no good going to a breeder who's got one good bird who wins everywhere. They go to the bird room and they're not a good blind. So, but you need to talk to somebody with a lot of experience who can advise you. And then the other thing is, get into your mind what the model you're breeding to. And at the moment, there's just the one model everybody should be breeding to. And that is the Roy Aplin model. And as you can see, the size of it, the width of it, the short and stockiness, and the feather quality. So these are the points we're looking at. And then when you go to a breeder and purchase your birds, don't buy too many, just enough that you're going to be able to control and be happy to breed with. Right. The other thing is, with newcomers, obviously with the type of knowledge, I mean, for me, there's no other canary, although I am leaning over to the Fife a little bit.
The dark side.
But they will never overtake my knowledge. But you need the second bird to have with the knowledge, because they can be temperamental. They can let you down. You can have more upsets with knowledge, so you need some guarantees. So you need a second bird for feeding. The Fifes are good for that, or cross mongrel. But my advice is that you put all your fuss round eggs under your feeders. Then you haven't got to worry about the knowledge. Because what I find with the knowledge, being a bigger bird, and you get them fit, they don't, the fuss round, they don't tend to sit the full time. So if they're under a little voice, you can guarantee that fuss round. Yeah. And then work on your second and third round if you want them to feed them. Yeah. Like that. But to breed knowledge, you need to guarantee that fuss round.
Fantastic. Very wise words from an incredibly wise man. Keith, many thanks indeed for your time. Thank you for letting the Canary Room and our cameras come in to see you. It's been a privilege and it's been an absolute pleasure. So thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you, Matt. And it's been my pleasure having you over here and discuss the birds, because knowledge like this needs to get out to people, and especially the newcomers, because we're not here forever, and this knowledge needs to be passed on.
Absolutely, absolutely. Fantastic. My huge thanks to Keith and of course to his lovely wife Margaret, who supplied me with some very, very delicious fruitcake. I hope you enjoyed that episode. Coming up on the Canary Room, we've got another couple of On the Roads. We will go and see, next up, the Kendall Stud. So we'll catch up with Adam and Sharon and Kev and Sue, and we'll see all of their birds, and then we take a trip over across the M62 to go and see the bird room and some fantastic Gloucester Canaries of the Gloucester man himself. It is, of course, Dave Rands. So we've got a trip to Dave. Don't miss an episode of the Canary Room. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification button. Until next time, take care.